Lovers, lovers make the worst enemies. But let's start this off with the proposal. It was it was perfect. Picture this, a rooftop terrace overlooking the city, twinkling lights, a symphony of soft music, and Lucas, my Lucas, down on one knee, holding a ring that could probably pay off a small country's national debt. Ava, he'd said, his voice husky with emotion, or what I thought was emotion, will you marry me? I'd been swept off my feet, of course. Who wouldn't be? Lucas Hawthorne was everything a girl could dream of: handsome, successful, and ridiculously wealthy. He was the CEO of Hawthorne Enterprises, a billion-dollar empire that spanned continents, industries, and what basically everything I didn't understand about the business world. But I didn't care about the business world. I cared about Lucas. His charming smile, his piercing blue eyes, his ability to make me feel like the only woman in the world. He'd showered me with gifts, whisked me away on exotic vacations, and introduced me to a world of luxury and privilege I'd never even dreamed of. I was Ava, the small-town girl who'd landed Prince Charming, the one who'd captured the heart of the most eligible bachelor in the city. But looking back, there were signs, red flags, flashing neon signs, blaring sirens, that I'd conveniently chosen to ignore. Like the time he'd suggested, I quit my job, the one I loved, the one that gave me a sense of purpose and independence. It wouldn't be appropriate for my wife to be working, he'd said, his voice smooth, his smile condescending. Or the time he'd redecorated my apartment, replacing my cozy, eclectic furniture with sleek, minimalist pieces that looked like they belonged in a museum, not a home. It needs to reflect your new status, darling, he'd said, his eyes scanning the room with a critical gaze. And then there were the comments, the subtle digs about my family, my background, eh, my lack of pedigree. You'll need to polish up your social skills, darling, he'd say, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. I'd rationalized it all, of course. He was just trying to help me, to guide me, to make me worthy of his world, his status, his name. But the biggest red flag of all, the prenup, it was ironclad. Pages and pages of legalese, basically saying that if we ever divorced, I'd walk away with nothing. No settlement, no shares, no nothing. It's just a formality, darling, he'd said, his voice smooth, his smile reassuring. A way to protect my assets, my company, my legacy? I trusted him, of course. I was blinded by love, by the fairy tale, by the naive belief that our love was stronger than any legal document. So I signed it, without hesitation, without question, without a lawyer. And as I stood there, pen in hand, my signature sealing my fate, I had no idea that I was signing away more than just my financial future. I was signing away my freedom. Okay, so the gilded cage. That's what it felt like, being Mrs. Lucas Hawthorne. Sure, there were the perks, the designer clothes, the luxurious penthouse, the private jet that whisked me away to exotic locations. But it was all a facade, a carefully constructed illusion of happiness, of perfection, of having it all. My days were filled with charity luncheons, gallery openings, and endless social gatherings where I'd smile and nod and pretend to be interested in the latest stock market trends or the newest designer handbag. I was Ava Hawthorne, the poised and polished CEO's wife, the one who always had the perfect outfit, the perfect smile, the perfect everything. But behind the facade, I was withering. Lucas was always busy, always working, always absent. He'd come home late, his phone glued to his ear, his mind a million miles away. He'd give me a perfunctory kiss, a distracted, "How was your day?" and then disappear into his study, his world of spreadsheets and conference calls. Our conversations were superficial, filled with polite inquiries about our schedules, our social obligations, our lack of a real connection. We were like two ships passing in the night, our paths briefly intersecting before diverging again, leaving me feeling empty. And the pressure? It was suffocating. Every event, every appearance, every Every moment was scrutinized, analyzed, and judged. The society pages, the gossip columns, the internet was always watching, waiting for me to slip up, to make a mistake, to be anything less than perfect. I felt like a bird in a gilded cage, surrounded by luxury but trapped, unable to fly, unable to be myself. The real Ava, the one with dreams and ambitions and a personality that extended beyond the latest fashion trends, was slowly fading away, replaced by a Stepford wife version of myself. And the loneliness? It was crushing. I had no real friends, no confidants, no one to talk to about the emptiness, the frustration, the growing realization that I'd made a mistake. A huge, life-altering mistake. I'd married for love, for partnership, for the fairy tale. But the fairy tale had turned into a nightmare, a gilded cage where I was trapped, suffocating and desperately unhappy. And as I stood there, in my designer dress, my hair perfectly coiffed, my smile plastered on my face, I couldn't help but think, there had to be more to life than this. There had to be a way out, a way to escape, a way to reclaim myself. Okay, so the divorce. It wasn't exactly a scene out of a romantic comedy with tearful confessions and dramatic reconciliations. No, this was more like a scene out of a corporate thriller, cold, calculated, and let's just say it involved a lot less kissing and a lot more legal jargon. I was in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast, which, let's be honest, was mostly just burnt toast and lukewarm coffee, when Lucas walked in, his face set in a grim line, his eyes devoid of any emotion. He was holding a manila envelope, the kind that usually contained bad news, like tax audits or divorce papers. "Ava," he said, his voice flat, his tone businesslike, "we need to talk." I braced myself, my heart pounding, my stomach churning. I knew what was coming. I'd seen the signs, the growing distance, the lack of affection, the general, "I'm not happy and it's your fault" vibe he'd been radiating for the past few months. He handed me the envelope, his fingers brushing mine briefly, his touch cold and impersonal. "I think you'll find everything you need in there," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth, any regret, any emotion at all. I opened the envelope, my hands trembling, my eyes scanning the pages of legalese. It was the prenup, of course. The ironclad document that basically said I was entitled to nothing. No settlement, no shares, no nothing. "Lucas?" I said, my voice barely a whisper, my eyes welling up with tears. What is this?" He sighed, a dramatic put-upon sigh that made me want to throw the burnt toast at his perfectly coiffed head. "It's a divorce, Ava. I'm ending our marriage." "But why?" I choked out, the tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "What did I do wrong?" He looked at me, his eyes cold, his expression, it was almost pitying. "You didn't do anything wrong, Ava. It's just, I've realized we're not compatible. We want different things. We're not good together." "Not good together?" I repeated, my voice rising, the anger finally breaking through the shock and hurt. "We were perfect. We had everything. What more could you possibly want?" He shrugged, his indifference like a slap in the face. "I want more. I want someone who understands my world, my ambitions, my needs." "Your needs?" I scoffed, the tears turning to rage. "What about my needs, my dreams, my everything that I sacrificed for you? For this marriage?" He looked at me, his eyes hardening, his voice laced with a hint of impatience. "Ava, let's not make this messy. Just sign the papers. It will be easier for everyone. Easier for him, maybe. But for me, it was the end of the world, the shattering of a dream, the realization that I'd been nothing more than a pawn in his game of ambition and social climbing." I stared at him, my heart aching, my mind reeling. This wasn't the man I'd married, the man I'd loved, the man I'd thought I knew. This was a stranger, a cold, heartless stranger who was discarding me like a like a last season's handbag. And as I looked at him, his face impassive, his eyes devoid of any emotion, I finally understood. He'd never loved me. He'd never cared. He'd just used me. And the worst part? I'd let him. Okay, so the pregnancy test. Not exactly the kind of news you expect when your husband just served you divorce papers, right? But life, as I was quickly learning, was full of surprises. Unpleasant, life-altering, holy crap, what am I going to do kind of surprises. I was numb, the divorce papers clutched in my hand, the words blurring before my eyes. Lucas was gone, my life was imploding, and I was pretty sure I was going to throw up. I stumbled into the bathroom, the cool tiles a welcome relief against my flushed skin. And that's when I saw it. The pregnancy test, tucked away in the corner of the medicine cabinet, a forgotten relic from a time when we were actually trying. I stared at it, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. Could I be? No, it was impossible. We'd been so careful, so not exactly passionate in the bedroom lately. More like two strangers sharing a bed, fulfilling a marital obligation, not exactly making babies. But the doubt lingered, a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispering, "What if?" So I did what any rational, slightly hysterical woman would do. I peed on a stick and waited. And waited. And then 2 lines, 2 freaking lines. Twins. I was pregnant with twins. The news hit me like a tidal wave, washing over me, drowning me in a sea of... It was hard to tell. Joy, fear, disbelief, maybe a little bit of all of the above. I was going to be a mother. A single mother. With no husband, no support system, no freaking clue what I was doing. The fear was overwhelming. How was I going to do this? How was I going to provide for them, care for them, protect them? I was just Ava. Not Ava Hawthorne, the CEO's wife, but Ava, the nobody. But then a flicker of hope ignited in the darkness. A memory, a faint whisper from the past, a clause, a hidden clause in the ironclad prenup. I dug out the document, my fingers trembling, my eyes scanning the pages of legalese. And there it was, buried in the fine print, a clause that stated, if I had children, the entire agreement was void. Void, null, and void. Meaning, I was entitled to half of everything. Half of Lucas's fortune, half of his assets, half of everything he'd worked so hard to acquire. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning, electrifying me, energizing me, empowering me. This wasn't just a surprise, a twist of fate, a holy crap moment. It was an opportunity, a chance to fight back, to reclaim my life, to make him pay. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd outsmarted me, outmaneuvered me, outlawyered me. He was wrong, so wrong. I was Ava, and I was about to become his worst nightmare. Okay, so Operation Screw You, Lucas, was officially in motion. But this wasn't some impulsive, harebrained scheme cooked up in a fit of rage. No, this was about strategy, about playing the long game, about using my brain for something other than picking out the perfect shade of lipstick to match my designer dress. First things first, knowledge is power. I needed to understand the prenup, the loopholes, the implications, the everything. So I did what any self-respecting woman in the 21st century would do. I Googled it. Okay, I also consulted a lawyer, a real one this time, not the one Lucas had hired to protect his precious assets. This lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah, who looked like she could win a case against a honey badger, explained the ins and outs of the prenup, the hidden clause, the fact that I was basically sitting on a gold mine. Ava, she'd said, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of admiration and amusement, you've got him by the... Let's just say you've got him where it hurts. And she was right. The prenup, the one Lucas had so carefully crafted to protect his fortune, was now my weapon, my shield, my ticket to freedom. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about justice, about showing him that he couldn't just discard me, erase me, pretend I was insignificant. I was Ava. and I was about to become his worst nightmare. So I started planning, I researched corporate law, I studied the stock market, I basically turned myself into a mini MBA in a matter of weeks. I learned about shareholder rights, boardroom dynamics, and the art of the hostile takeover. Because that was my plan. I wasn't just going to take half of his money. Oh no, I was going to take half of his company. His precious Hawthorne Enterprises, the empire he'd built, the legacy he'd obsessed over, the everything that mattered more to him than I ever did. I knew he wouldn't see it coming. He'd underestimated me, just like everyone else had. He thought I was just a pretty face, a trophy wife, a placeholder until he found someone more suitable. He was wrong, so wrong. I was Ava, and I was about to show him what I was made of. I was going to use his own weapon against him, his own prenup, his own greed, his own arrogance. I was going to take him down, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation, out of a need to protect myself, my unborn children, my future. And as I sat there surrounded by legal documents, financial reports, and a whole lot of caffeine, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. This wasn't just a plan, a strategy, a way to get back at him. It was a rebirth, a transformation, a chance to finally become the woman I was meant to be. I was Ava, and I was ready for war. Okay, so enter Damian Blackwell. Not exactly the kind of guy you invite to a tea party, you know? More like the guy you hire to... Let's just say he wasn't known for his gentle persuasion techniques. He was Lucas's arch rival, the CEO of Blackwell Industries, a man who'd built his empire on ambition, ruthlessness, and a healthy dose of "I'll crush anyone who gets in my way" attitude. But he was also my key to revenge. I contacted him through a series of carefully crafted emails and anonymous messages, leading him on a scavenger hunt of sorts until he finally agreed to meet me. We met at a secluded restaurant, the kind with dimly lit booths and enough privacy to plot a corporate coup. He walked in, all sharp angles and tailored suits, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory gaze. He looked like he could smell fear, and let's be honest, I was terrified. But I also had a plan, a weapon, and a whole lot of determination. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone that could probably shatter glass. "I'm curious. Why me?" "Because you want what I have," I said, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. "And I want what you can give me." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Intriguing. Go on." I laid out my plan, the prenup, the hidden clause, the fact that I was about to become the majority shareholder of Hawthorne Enterprises. His eyes widened, his initial skepticism replaced by a predatory gleam. "You're proposing," he began, his voice laced with disbelief, "that we team up to take down Lucas Hawthorne?" "Exactly," I said, my smile a touch feral. "You get the company, I get my revenge, and Lucas, he gets what he deserves." He leaned back, his eyes narrowed, his mind clearly calculating the risks and rewards. "It's a bold move, Mrs. Hawthorne, a risky move. What makes you think I'd trust you, a woman who was, until recently, married to my enemy?" "Because I have nothing left to lose," I said, my voice low, my gaze intense. "And because you need me. You can't take down Lucas without me. He's too powerful, too entrenched. But with my shares, the game changes." He was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on mine, his expression unreadable. Then, a slow smile spread across his face, a predator baring its teeth. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, his voice smooth, his tone dangerous, "I believe we have a deal." We shook hands, our grips firm, our eyes locked in a silent agreement. This was an alliance forged in ambition, in revenge, in a mutual desire to see Lucas Hawthorne fall. And as I walked out of the restaurant, the city lights reflecting in my eyes, I couldn't help but feel a surge of power. I wasn't just Ava, the discarded wife, anymore. I was Ava, the player, the one with the power to change the game, the one who was about to... Let's just say Lucas was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially one with a hidden clause and a ruthless ally. Okay, so the signing, it wasn't exactly a somber occasion, with tears and tissues and mournful goodbyes. No, this was more like a business transaction, a closing of a deal, a see ya wouldn't want to be ya kind of moment. Lucas sat across from me, his lawyer hovering nearby like a nervous bird, the divorce papers spread out on the mahogany table. He looked impatient, like he had better things to do than waste his precious time on this formality. Little did he know. I picked up the pen, a sleek silver Mont Blanc that probably cost more than my old car, and smiled. Not a sad smile, not a bitter smile, but let's just say it was the kind of smile that could make a shark nervous. Lucas frowned, his brow furrowed with confusion. "What's so amusing, Ava?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of irritation. "Oh, nothing," I said, my smile widening. "Just life's little ironies." I signed the papers, my signature smooth and confident, a stark contrast to the trembling hand that had signed the prenup all those years ago. I slid the papers back across the table, my eyes meeting his, my smile unwavering. "There you go," I said, my voice light, my tone. Let's just say it wasn't exactly dripping with sorrow. "All signed and sealed. Congratulations, Lucas. You're a free man." He looked at me, his confusion growing, his eyes searching mine for what? Regret? Sadness? He wouldn't find it. "Ava," he began, his voice hesitant, "are you sure about this? There's no going back." "Oh, I'm sure," I said, my smile widening. "In fact, I'm looking forward to it. To a new chapter, a new beginning, a life without you." He shifted in his seat, his discomfort palpable. "Ava, he started, but I cut him off. "Don't worry, Lucas," I said, my voice sweet, my tone. Let's just say it was a little bit menacing. "I'm sure you'll be just fine. You're resourceful. And you have options." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, my smile turning a touch predatory. "Just make sure you read the fine print, darling," I added, my voice dropping to a whisper. "It's fascinating." He stared at me, his eyes wide with, let's just say they weren't exactly filled with understanding, but there was a flicker of something? Doubt? Fear? Maybe even a hint of realization? I stood up, gathering my things, my smile widening. "Goodbye, Lucas," I said, my voice firm, my tone final. "Enjoy your freedom. I know I will." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving him sitting there, the signed divorce papers in front of him, his face pale, his eyes filled with, let's just say he was starting to realize that he might have just made a very, very big mistake. Okay, so the power play. This wasn't just about getting a fair share. Oh no, this was about taking the whole damn board game and flipping it over. Lucas thought he'd outsmarted me with his fancy prenup, but honey, I just played him at his own game. The day after the divorce was finalized, I strolled into Hawthorne Enterprises. Head held high, a smug little smile playing on my lips. Lucas's secretary, bless her cotton socks, nearly fainted when she saw me. "Mrs. Hawthorne?" she stammered, her eyes wide. "But the divorce." "Finalized," I said, my smile widening. "And I'm here to see my ex-husband." I didn't wait for her to announce me. I just marched straight into Lucas's office, the click of my heels echoing through the silent space. He looked up, his face a mask of surprise, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Ava," he said, his voice tight. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, just taking care of some business," I said, my smile turning predatory. I pulled out a folder, thick with legal documents, and tossed it onto his desk. "I believe you're familiar with these?" He flipped through the pages, his face paling with every turn. It was the prenup, of course, but not just any prenup. This was the annotated version, the one with all the highlighted clauses, the underlined loopholes, the one that basically screamed, "Gotcha!" What is this?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "It's your worst nightmare, darling," I said, my smile widening. "It's the end of your reign." He looked up, his eyes filled with, let's just say they weren't exactly filled with love and admiration. You can't do this, he said, his voice laced with panic. This is my company, my legacy. Not anymore, I said, my voice cold, my tone final. It's ours now, mine and Damien Blackwell's. His jaw dropped, his eyes widening in disbelief. Blackwell? You! You sold your shares to him? Every single one, I said, my smile turning triumphant. He slumped back in his chair, defeated, his face a mask of, let's just say it wasn't pretty. He'd lost. He'd lost his wife, his company, his everything. And as I stood there, watching him crumble, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. This wasn't just about the money, the power, the revenge. It was about justice. It was about showing him that he couldn't just discard people, use them, and then toss them aside like yesterday's trash. I was Ava, and I just played him at his own game and won. Okay, so the dethroning, it wasn't a quiet, dignified affair, with polite handshakes and well wishes for future endeavors. No, this was a full-blown corporate coup, a hostile takeover, a public humiliation of epic proportions. The boardroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation, the atmosphere, let's just say it wasn't exactly conducive to a friendly game of poker. Lucas sat at the head of the table, his face pale, his eyes darting around the room, searching for, what, loyalty, support? He wouldn't find it. Damien Blackwell sat across from him, his expression impassive, his gaze unwavering. He looked like a predator, a lion watching its prey, a man who was about to enjoy a very satisfying meal. Gentlemen, Damien began, his voice smooth, his tone, let's just say it wasn't exactly warm and fuzzy. As you know, due to a recent acquisition of shares, Blackwell Industries is now the majority shareholder of Hawthorne Enterprises. A murmur rippled through the room, the board members exchanging nervous glances. They knew what this meant. They knew that Lucas's reign was over. Lucas stood up, his face flushed, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. This is outrageous, he sputtered. You can't do this. This is my company, my family's legacy. Damien raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Your family's legacy? He echoed, his voice laced with sarcasm. Or your legacy, the one you built on, let's just say, some rather questionable business practices? Lucas clenched his fists, his face turning an alarming shade of red. You're trying to steal my company, he shouted. I won't let you. I'll fight you. I'll sue. Damien chuckled, a low, menacing sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Sue me? On what grounds? That I exercised my rights as a shareholder? That I outsmarted you? Lucas was cornered, trapped, his back against the wall. He looked around the room, his eyes pleading, searching for something. But the board members just looked away, avoiding his gaze, their loyalty clearly aligned with the new majority shareholder. You can't do this, he repeated, his voice cracking, his desperation palpable. This is everything I've worked for? And now it's mine, Damien said, his voice cold, his tone final. Consider it a hostile takeover. He gestured to a security guard standing by the door. Escort Mr. Hawthorne out of the building, he said, his voice dismissive, his tone, let's just say it wasn't open for discussion. Lucas was dragged out of the boardroom, his protests echoing through the empty space, his face a mask of utter defeat. Damien turned to the remaining board members, his smile returning, his gaze now, let's just say it was a little bit predatory. Now, gentlemen, he said, his voice smooth, his tone confident, let's discuss the future of Hawthorne Enterprises. And with that, Lucas Hawthorne, the once powerful CEO, the man who'd built a billion-dollar empire, was ousted from his own company, his legacy crumbling before his very eyes. He tried to fight back, of course. He hired lawyers, he filed lawsuits, he did everything he could to regain control. But it was too late. Damian Blackwell was in charge now, and he wasn't about to relinquish his newfound power. Lucas was a ghost, a pariah, a, a reminder of what happens when you underestimate your rivals, when you betray those who trust you, when you think you're untouchable. He was no longer the king of the corporate world. He was just Lucas, a man who'd lost everything. Okay, so the media circus. It wasn't just a small-town gossip column. Oh no, this was a full-blown media frenzy, a feeding frenzy of epic proportions, a public shaming that would make even the most seasoned celebrity blush. The divorce itself was enough to pique the public's interest. Lucas Hawthorne, the city's most eligible bachelor, the CEO of a billion-dollar empire, divorcing his seemingly perfect wife. Scandalous, but the corporate takeover? That was the icing on the cake, the cherry on top, the fuel for a media firestorm that would burn for weeks. The tabloids went wild, of course. Hawthorne's heartbreak, screamed the headlines. CEO's cold-hearted divorce. From riches to rags, they dug up every detail of the divorce, the prenup, the hidden clause, the fact that Lucas had basically been outsmarted by his own wife. The gossip blogs chimed in, speculating about the reasons for the divorce, the other woman, or women plural, according to some sources, the general awfulness of Lucas's behavior. They painted him as a cold, ruthless businessman who discarded his wife like a used napkin. And then there was the corporate takeover. Damian Blackwell, Lucas's arch rival, swooping in and snatching away his company, his legacy, his everything. It was a David versus Goliath story, a tale of corporate intrigue, a public humiliation that would make even the most hardened CEO cringe. The news channels were abuzz with the story, analysts dissecting every detail of the takeover, speculating about the motives, the implications, the future of Hawthorne Enterprises. They interviewed insiders, sources close to the family, and anyone who was willing to talk about the scandal. And the public? Well, they ate it up. They loved it. They devoured every juicy detail, every scandalous rumor, every bit of gossip they could get their hands on. They were fascinated by the downfall of Lucas Hawthorne, the once untouchable CEO, the man who thought he was above it all. The social media platforms exploded with comments, memes, and a whole lot of creative insults directed at Lucas. #Hawthorne humble, #prenup fail, #divorce karma, right? The hashtags went viral, trending for days, mocking his misfortune, his arrogance, his general awfulness. His carefully crafted image, the polished, sophisticated CEO, the man who had it all, was shattered, replaced by a caricature of a greedy, heartless, and ultimately foolish man. He tried to defend himself, of course. He issued statements. He gave interviews. He tried to spin the narrative in his favor, but it was too late. The damage was done. His reputation was ruined. He was no longer Lucas Hawthorne, the respected CEO. He was Lucas Hawthorne, the disgraced ex-husband, the corporate loser, the man who'd been publicly humiliated by his own wife and his arch rival. And as I sat in my new office, overlooking the city, my phone buzzing with notifications about the latest developments in the Hawthorne scandal, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. It was a public reckoning, a reminder that no one is above the law, above karma, above the consequences of their actions. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. So wrong. And now the whole world knew it. Okay, so the Great Escape. It wasn't a dramatic, running from the paparazzi kind of thing, though there were a few lingering photographers lurking outside my building for a while. More like a quiet, calculated, I'm taking my babies and my millions and I'm out kind of move. I'd had enough of the high society world, the constant scrutiny, the backstabbing, the general shallowness of it all. I was done with the charity galas, the designer clothes, the fake smiles, the constant pressure to be someone I wasn't. I cashed out, obviously. My share of Hawthorne Enterprises was substantial, to say the least. enough to set me and my twins up for life, several times over. I didn't need the money to validate me, to define me, to prove anything to anyone. But it was nice, really nice. I chose a new city far from the glitz and glamour of my previous life, a place where I could be just Ava, not Ava Hawthorne, the ex-wife of a disgraced CEO, not Ava, the corporate raider, not anyone other than myself. It was a smaller city with tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and a slower pace of life. A place where I could raise my twins, away from the spotlight, away from the drama, away from just everything that reminded me of Lucas and his world. I bought a house, a comfortable, spacious house with a big backyard for my twins to play in. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't extravagant, it was home. A place where I could finally be myself, where I could relax, where I could just be a mom. The move was liberating. It was like shedding a skin, discarding a costume, finally being free to ours to breathe. I decorated the house to my taste, not to impress anyone, not to reflect a certain image, but because it made me happy. I furnished it with cozy furniture, colorful artwork, and things that actually felt like me. Not the minimalist, sterile pieces I'd been forced to live with in my previous life. I enrolled my twins in a local daycare, a place where they could play, learn, and just be kids. I made friends with other moms, women who didn't care about my past, my money, my anything other than the fact that we were all just trying to navigate the joys and challenges of motherhood. And as I settled into my new life, my new city, my new everything, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer living in the shadow of Lucas Hawthorne, no longer defined by my marriage, my divorce, my past. I was Ava, a mother, a businesswoman, on my own terms, of course, a woman who had finally found herself. And as I held my twins in my arms, their tiny faces filled with love and trust, I knew I'd made the right choice. I'd escaped. And in doing so, I'd found myself. Okay, so the new guy. He wasn't a billionaire CEO. He didn't have a private jet, and he definitely didn't wear $1,000 suits. He was normal. Refreshingly, wonderfully normal. His name was Liam, and I met him at the park, of all places. My twins were busy building a sandcastle that looked more like a mud pie, and he was there with his niece, a giggling little girl who was determined to help them, even if it meant accidentally kicking sand in their faces. We started talking, the usual parent in the park. Small talk about the weather, the playground, the joys and challenges of raising kids. But there was something about him, a warmth, a kindness, a genuineness that I hadn't encountered in a long time. He was a writer, a struggling writer. He admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. He wrote children's books, stories filled with imagination, adventure, and a whole lot of heart. It was a far cry from the corporate world, the boardroom battles, the ruthless ambition that had defined my life with Lucas. We started dating, casually at first. Coffee dates, playground meetups, the occasional movie night after the kids were asleep. It was different. No fancy restaurants, no extravagant gifts, no pressure to be anyone other than myself. Liam saw me, the real me, the one who loved to laugh, who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, who was more comfortable in jeans and a t-shirt than a designer dress. He didn't care about my past, my money, my anything other than the fact that I was Ava. He listened to me, really listened, when I talked about my fears, my insecurities, my general, holy crap, I'm a single mom with twins, anxieties. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't judge. He just listened. And somehow that was enough. He was supportive, encouraging me to pursue my own dreams, my own ambitions, my own life. He didn't see me as an accessory, a trophy wife, a reflection of his own success. He saw me as a partner, an equal, a woman who was worthy of love and respect, regardless of her bank account or her ex-husband's reputation. And as I spent more time with him, as our connection deepened, as as I started to fall for him, I realized this was what it was supposed to feel like. This was what a real relationship was. A partnership, a love that wasn't based on status, power, or any of the things that had defined my life with Lucas. It was a second chance, a fresh start, a, a chance to finally experience the kind of love I'd always dreamed of. A love that was real, honest, and let's just say it involved a lot less board meetings and a lot more laughter. Okay, so the X factor. Just when I thought I'd finally escape the Hawthorne drama, guess who shows up? Lucas looking like a stray dog that had been left out in the rain, his eyes red-rimmed, his suit rumpled, his general aura of invincibility replaced by a pathetic air of desperation. He found me, of course. It wasn't hard. This wasn't exactly a witness protection program. He showed up at my doorstep, a bouquet of wilted flowers in one hand, a pleading look in his eyes. "Ava," he began, his voice hoarse. His tone, let's just say it wasn't exactly oozing with confidence. I need to talk to you." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. My expression, let's just say it wasn't exactly welcoming. "What about Lucas?" I asked, my voice flat, my tone, let's just say it was a little bit icy. "About us," he said, his voice cracking. "About what I did." "What you did?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "You mean discarding me like a used tissue, serving me divorce papers while I was pregnant with your twins, losing your company, your reputation, your everything because you underestimated me?" He winced, his face paling. I know. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I was a fool." "That's an understatement," I said, my voice laced with a hint of bitterness. "Ava," he pleaded, his eyes searching mine for what? Forgiveness? Pity? A second chance? He wouldn't find it. "I lost everything," he continued, his voice cracking. "My company, my money, my life. I have nothing left." "Except your freedom?" I said, my voice cold, my tone final. "The freedom you so desperately wanted. The freedom to be with whoever it is you're with now." He looked down, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of, let's just say it wasn't exactly remorse. It was more like regret. Regret that he'd lost his power, his status, his comfortable life. "Ava," he said, his voice pleading, "please, give me another chance. I'll be better. I'll be the husband you deserve, the father my children deserve." I shook my head, my smile sad, my eyes filled with, not pity, not exactly, more like understanding. Understanding that he was a man who'd built his life on a foundation of sand, a foundation that had crumbled beneath him, leaving him lost, confused, and desperate. "It's too late, Lucas," I said, my voice soft, my tone gentle. "You had your chance, and you blew it." He looked up, his eyes filled with, let's just say that they weren't exactly filled with love and longing. They were filled with despair. The despair of a man who'd realized too late what he'd truly lost. "Goodbye, Lucas," I said, my voice firm, my tone final. I wish you peace." And with that, I closed the door, shutting him out, shutting out the past, shutting out everything that had defined my life before. I wasn't that Ava anymore. I was stronger, wiser, and let's just say I was a hell of a lot happier. I had my twins, my new life, my everything that truly mattered. And as I walked away, the sound of Lucas's retreating footsteps echoing in the distance, I couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. I'd escaped. I'd survived. And I'd won. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a whole new book, a book where I was the author, the protagonist, the one in control. And I couldn't wait to see what happened next.